This video tutorial is for library staff, preparing them to provide self-serve interloan to their patrons. It will be informative for ILL department staff, managers, and public service staff. Starting at the SOLS website, in the Patron-Initiated Interlibrary Loan section, print the checklist for implementing Patron-Initiated Interlibrary Loan at your library. This checklist will guide you step by step through the process. Next, print the user guides for patrons and staff. So there is one that is written specifically for patrons, and you can provide your registered patron with a link that takes them to this guide on our website. There is a guide for staff to guide them through the process of preparing for patron-initiated interlibrary loan. Next, watch the video tutorials, one for patrons, one for staff, and we do recommend that the staff watch the patrons' experience of issuing their own ILL request with zPortal first, and then move to this video on staff preparation for providing the service. And finally, there is promotional material, a brochure, which you can download. It's a Word file, and you may customize it with your library details and photocopy it as a handout for your patrons. Now, let's switch to VDX and look at staff registering patrons for self-serve ILO. Libraries often have a register for this service link on their website that patrons fill in, and that is then sent as an email to the ILL department staff. All staff need to do to register a patron is create a VDX user record with a password for that patron. Let's have a look at registering a patron named Judith Craig, who has registered or requested registration. So staff will get that request, go into user record. I do recommend that you check to see if the record already exists before you create a brand new one. So I'm going to look for Craig, the surname, any part, and it is Judith Craig that has made this request to be registered. So with a pre-existing record, all I need to do is choose Edit. You need to enter a password for the patron. What some libraries have been doing is selecting the patron's the last 4 digits of their phone number, but you can make it anything you like. You can make the same password for all patrons using self-serve because the unique piece is their barcode. Don't fuss too much about a password because the first thing the patron can do when they log in is change their password. So I'm going to make it the phone number. And I have to enter it again, and I must have a tick mark in update password. If there's an email address and I'm aware of it, it's useful to add it to the user record because it's very handy for a lot of activities in VDX. So I'm going to add this person's. And the next step is to change their permission level. When staff create a user record, when they're going to mediate for a patron, they choose Approved Patron. There are 2 categories for patrons that are going to do their own requests. One is Auto-Authorized Patron, which allows the patron to their requests will automatically go into the system without staff intervention. This category assignment accommodates the patron getting the item a little faster and saves staff time as there is no need to further process requests before they go into the system. So I encourage most libraries to start out with that category. If you found a need to supervise a patron's requests before they enter the system, you would choose Manual Authorized Patrons. This category could be practical for a problem user. The requests for this category of patron will remain idle, auto-mediated off manual in the work queue until staff further process them. So I'm going to go back and make this one an auto-authorized patron. And then the next thing you can do is make sure their pickup location default is set in their user record. If you have multiple pickup locations, pick the appropriate one for this patron if you know it. Then the staff notes on a user record are indeed just that, staff notes. Nobody else can see these but staff, and so I'm just going to type a note that this patron registered for PI on April 10th, 2017, and the password equals 2669, which is the phone number digits. So that's just a note for staff to know that this is when this patron registered for this service. Once you've updated the user record for the patron, just submit the changes. And of course, if you didn't find one to edit, you would have had to use the create link to create a brand new one from scratch. That's about it as far as registering the patron from the staff perspective. The next step is to inform the patron of what their credentials are. And typically that's an email to the patron. You provide the barcode and password for login and a link to the user guide on the SOLS website. And that's sort of a virtual training, so to speak. Give them the login, give them a link to a user guide, and tell them to enjoy using this service. There are a few minor workflow adjustments for staff once patron-initiated ILL has been implemented at their library. These are all accessed through the borrower work queue. The first one is monitoring idle auth manual requests. Now these are often non-print materials. You would be accustomed to seeing that in that category. But once you have patron initiated implemented, if any of your self-serve patrons have been categorized in their user record as a manual authorized patron, then you will need to start monitoring this category. We do have an example in here, so we'll select that. And I'm going to use the details link. Scrolling down to patron details, I see that this title is for a patron that the manual authorized patron status has been set in their user record, and that's just the acronym MANP. So I see that's why the request did not immediately go into the system, that it needs to be manually authorized by staff. How do you do that? You simply use the request action, make sure that the status is authorized, and go down and hit the request button. The other area for staff to keep an eye on is idle locally held, and that is a work queue category. And if there's a number in there, then the local ILL department staff should follow up. This is potentially something that a patron has requested through Interloan that your library holds a copy. And we've configured your VDX account to trap these items in the work queue for staff intervention and review. So we're going to look at these. There are step-by-step procedures for processing these in the staff guide. Let's have a look at Rise of Fire. So I'm going to use the details link. And I'm scrolling down, we'll observe my own location is number 1 in the rota, and the log messages says our local location is on the rota. On occasion, you might want to pursue an interlibrary loan for a locally held item if your copy is missing or damaged. To do so, use the request action. Scroll down to the rota position and remove your location, which is in the first position. So use the remove arrow to take your location out of the rota, and then all you have to do is submit the request. And it will engage with the next rota location, and that's done. If denying the interloan request because you're going to place a hold on your local copy for the patron, you can take some steps to communicate that decision to the patron. Use the request action. Select unauthorized at the top of the screen. Remember, you're doing this because you do not want this request to go on your own pick list. Type a note at the beginning of the title field. And I use capital letters and I'm going to say unfilled, locally held. And that is just a note that the patron would observe if they happen to be browsing their requests under the My Request link in the Z Portal interface. We're going to elaborate on that heads up in the title field by going down to the Patron Notes area. Placed on the local copy for you. Etc., etc. And then you use the request button to update that. If there was an email address in the request, then there is one more step you can take to ensure the patron is updated with the status. So go to the request again and retrieve it and action it with the Send User Alert, which sends an email to the patrons. We're just going to double whammy our communication on this. So there is an email, and you can see that the information that you typed in the notes area is present. All you have to do is hit the send, and the patron will get an email at home. So the patron will be updated with an email and also be able to observe the note typed in the on the request if they happen to be browsing under My Requests in Z Portal. And lastly, another workflow item that staff need to pay attention to is understanding the VDX received list. If staff have kept a paper trail of requests that you issue on behalf of patrons, bear in mind you will not have any paper for requests that have been issued by patrons at home in their pajamas. So if you are consulting a paper file for patron notification for pickup processing, you're going to not start to need to use the VDX received report now. And this is how you'll interpret this. The entered by field provides the clue. So you run the pick list after you've performed received. Patron's name, entered by, same name. So Rachel entered this request. Patron name, entered by staff at the location. Patron name, entered by patron name. So if received list provides a clue in the enter by field so you know not to hunt for paper for things that are entered by the patron themselves. And lastly, for your consideration, we know that the Z Portal interface can be used effectively by patrons to issue their own interlibrary loan requests. Z Portal can also be efficient for public service staff or branch staff to use a Z Portal account to submit interlibrary loan requests on behalf of patrons they're serving at their location. Doing so reduces overall staff handling. Paper or web forms do not need to be filled out and delivered to the centralized ILL department staff to be entered into VDX. There are two options, both of them described in the staff guide for libraries implementing Patron ILL, to consider, and which option you might choose is dependent on your procedures for patron notification to pick up a received item. I will quickly demonstrate setting up a user record as branch staff, where the requests will automatically go into the system from the branch. And again, this is all laid out step by step in your staff guide if you wish to implement this part or this particular aspect of user records and Z Portal. So I'm going to go to user and I'm going to create an account for my branch. I enter the barcode, always with my library code preface and a hyphen. And then when it's a branch or public service staff, you don't really need to enter a number, like a library card number. So let's say you're making this for public service. I would just say PSD for public service desk, or maybe it's for a branch that's called North Branch, so you just say North. And then down here in the surname field, I would enter the name, North Branch. And in this case, you're instructed to choose ILL Librarian Auto or ILL Librarian Manual. And I'm going to do a demo of Auto. The join date is April 10, 2018. And I see I've done that wrong. Redo. So it's 10 April 2018. VDX is fussy as to how you enter that. And then you would pick the default pickup location as North Branch. And in the notes field, I type a note submitting ILL on behalf of local patrons. So that's just a note that for my whole purpose in creating this account. Branch staff submit ILL on behalf of local patrons. So you know they're using a zPortal account and the password you assigned, and maybe you made it ILO. And of course you have to make sure you update that password in the record. And submit. And then if you went to zPortal and tested that sign in or log in, we said it was North, and remember the staff would not be putting OBA preface, just the what follows the hyphen. And I think we made the password ILO, and they would pick the library name from the authentication service, and up here user North Branch is logged in. The branch staff, patrons standing right beside them at their elbow, would type the title that the patron is looking for. And when results come back on the screen, then they would choose the appropriate thing. Patron standing there, they'd say, do get it. Now remember, the patron or the identity for this is North Branch. So the branch staff have to be very careful to go down to special instructions and put that it's for Jane Doe, and her library card number is this, and her phone number is this, etc. They have to stamp it in special instructions with who it's really for. But that is now become a request at the Barrie Library's VDX account from North Branch on behalf of this patron. If you think this could be a good approach for your library to adopt, compare the two options described in the staff guide and decide which one works in your environment. The option you choose will depend on your patron notification procedures for picking up an ILL item. And remember, you can use VDX Test and zPortal Test System to mock up an experience to get a feel for how it would work. And that's it. Thanks for watching this video.